Perfect so far. So no glitches. Well, I have no idea what the problem was there, so I apologize for that. Um, we got 9 people back. Okay. And again, this is just going to be a questions and answer session. And in the future, I was thinking about doing just a questions and answer session, but I think probably at the end of each one, so much better. Okay, Ed, good. Um, at the end of the future live events, I'll do just a question and answer. For those that want to stick on, I understand how you might not want to sit and watch this. I know it's boring, but whatever. Okay, so let's go back. I'm going to scroll through some of the questions. Um, Keith, okay, Kevin. So Kevin, is Kevin back on? Kevin Tibbs. Kevin Tibbs back on. Okay, good. I don't see Kevin. Kevin, give me do a thumbs or whatever it is, or just say, "Hey, I'm here." I don't know if hopefully I answered all your questions on the Vox system. So um, if the Vox is if the Vox is again, I'm just not a fan of Vox. The problem with Vox is that you end up false triggering a lot, and when you false trigger, it takes you have to throw away a word, and it's to key the Vox, and then afterwards you have to wait about a second or so where you're not saying anything for the system to know you're not talking anymore for it so that it shuts down. Now you're listening. So with Vox, what I find is that people end up. It's a lot of what'd you say? What'd you say? What'd you say? Repeat what, and it gets really annoying after a while. So I like the control of push to talk. I understand that there are times that Vox is really handy. I'm gonna try not to drop my phone. I got it propped up here. But it turns out, I think for 95% of the time, Vox ends up being more of a pain in the backside than anything else. So the voice menu is something that I'm going to make a note, and I'll go over voice menu and squelch settings in a future video. I'm trying to keep these fresh so that I'm not redundant. You can always go back and watch the other videos to cover the same stuff if I get into the same thing. I wanted to cover troubleshooting, some things that I didn't cover the last time. Again, with the Mark 7, and this is something that Keith Pitts brought up, that with the Mark 7, don't use Vox in public safety. Public safety, and I didn't really talk about that. Let's talk about selection of your components. What are you diving? Hardwire I'm always going to recommend hardwire over wireless for public safety diving, period. There's no real reason that you should, there are times that wireless, and I don't want to paint any broad statements here, but wireless is, it just, you're tethering your divers for the most part in public safety diving 98% of the time anyway. So if you're tethering your divers, you might as well use a comm rope and talk up that tether. The comm ropes work just fine as tethers. The strength of them is sufficient enough. The thing about wireless, if you lose your diver, especially in black water, how do you find your diver? How do you respond to a safety diver to a diver on wireless without a tether? I could talk about that as well in why do we use comm lines, and we're snag prone environments with hardwire can be a challenge. Well, I can tell you, if you're in a snag prone environment, it might be even more important to have hardwire, because if your diver gets snagged and becomes entangled to a point as to where they can't self-resolve, you gotta be able to splash your safety diver. So a lot of things with that. So and again, I don't want to get into that too awfully deep, but Mark 7 is really one of the best units out there for hardwire communications, and for public safety diving is where it really made its mark. Let's see, going through some other questions. When PTT mode, you hear yourself. I talked about that. Sorry, Robert Peebles, if you're back. Hopefully this is better for you. Wireless, smart in full, sorry, choppy. When you get time to go over silicone versus rubber and that's funny because I have articles that I've written on these, Brent. In the Interspiro, the silicone and rubber, rubber is a little stronger than silicone, but rubber dry rots. Silicone doesn't dry rot, but it tears a little easier. There's also issues with absorption of certain chemicals with silicone where rubber doesn't. But in the big scheme of things, I find that in the average 98%, and again, these are just arbitrary numbers, 98% of public safety divers, dive teams that are worried about absorption of certain chemicals into their equipment. If you look at water and you're worried about it eating your stuff, you probably are not in the right gear in the first place. So you need to think that through. Divers should always have the first right of refusal for not getting in the water. If it's something that's going to eat you up and make you sick, potentially hurt you, then you might want to reconsider splashing your divers in that water. If you're duty bound because it's the possibility that somebody could be rescued alive, that's a whole different story. And how often does that happen? Not very often. We all know that. But it does. It does happen. I mean, cold water, the golden hour in cold water is obviously, and then if you talk about a rescue, Golden Gate down in here in Florida, in southern Florida, down near Naples, they pulled a guy out of a tractor trailer that went into a ditch, a canal down there. I don't know exactly how long he was in, over half an hour, I believe. He was in an air pocket, and they pulled him out alive. And I talked to him a while back. The guy's not sending them Christmas cards. It just amazes me. If somebody pulls me out and saves my life, trust me, you're getting Christmas cards until the day I die. But it does happen. And airspaces only happen in Hollywood and apparently in Golden Gate, Florida, because they did pull a guy out alive. They were using the Mark 7 with a comm rope and Guardian masks, and they credit the use of our comm as an important factor in saving this guy's life. So something to think about. Okay. Ironic that you're having audio issues when talking about microphones. Yeah, Jason Blackwell, how are things down under? It is kind of ironic about that. So I'm scrolling through here. Relatively simple way. I answered Lou. I'm sorry, you can't use a Mark II as that. External speakers. Pete Gannon asked about external speakers. There's a couple of different ways I could go with that. External speakers if you need to go off of your Mark 7. Where's my Mark 7? Here you go. Not the Mark 7, the headset of the Mark 7. If you need to have an additional speaker for your Mark 7, you can go to Radio Shack. We know how that turned out. Go to your electronics store, order on Amazon a mini jack audio cable, female, to a male mini jack or whatever fits your some computer speakers. If you get battery powered computer speakers, then you can run audio out of your headset of your Mark 7 to an external speaker, so that if you're in training, and there's the advantage. I want to talk real quick about the Mark II versus the Mark 7. The advantage of the Mark II in training is that everybody sitting around can hear the diver talk. So you're hearing what's going on. So from a training standpoint, that's pretty useful. With the Mark 7, that's the only person, the person wearing this is the person that's hearing the conversation, plus whoever else is wired in, that being your safety diver, your 90% ready diver if you're on a Y splitter. So with that, you can take the signal out of the headset and go into an external speaker that will allow you to broadcast that signal out. You need amplified speakers to do that. So again, amplified wireless speakers work well for that application, or not wireless, but computer speakers, battery powered. Because you don't have an outlet generally at most dive sites. I didn't really talk about that as far as interference goes. That's a topic for another conversation. If you get buzzing in your system, buzzing comes from someplace. You got to track it down, find out where the buzzing comes from. If you're using generators, make sure your comm line is not laying across an AC cable. If your comm line is dressing across an AC cable, then there's potential of picking up buzzing with that. So Steve Barsky's book on dangerous environments. The one thing about what Ace brings up about education, there's different dive agencies out there. You have Dive Rescue International. Was on here. I don't know if he still is or not, but we've got Dive Rescue, Lifeguard Systems, ERDI. The other agencies, I think, are still growing into it. Those are the three kind of big agencies, or the ones that have been in it longer. They each have their strengths and probably, I won't say weaknesses because I'm not going to go there. I don't know their weaknesses. But the one thing about good training, and I'm going to kind of end on this, and I'll scroll through and see if I have any specific questions. Oh, positive pressure versus... Hang on, Brent. We can talk about positive pressure. I'll talk about that here too. But I want to cover budgets and training. You guys can get all the budget you need for equipment, and we're more than happy to take your money. Because we're in business. We supply equipment. We have to manufacture it. We have to be able to make money, or we'll go out of business. And sure, we want to sell you gear. And we love seeing our gear, do what it does, and does very well to help our public safety, our first responders and so forth, and our military and so on. But if with your dive teams, if you have a budget, make sure you budget for training. You can have all the neat and gee whizzy stuff if you don't know how to use it safely and keep your divers alive, then you're doing yourself a disservice and your people a disservice. Take advantage too, and I'm going to leave this on this subject, I'm going to leave it at this. Take advantage of electronics now. A Humminbird, Lowrance, the HDS systems that Lowrance has out, the new stuff that's coming out, especially for shallow water operations, very economical, and you can image with this stuff, and some of these images are really good. The point being is you minimize it, and then also take advantage of higher end technology, mutual aid agreements with dive teams that do have stuff like Mesotech 1000s, or the sector scan sonars or side scan sonars and so forth. Anytime you can keep your divers out of the water, your divers are safe. Use your divers as necessary. Too many case studies where people didn't need to die, but simply because somebody screwed up, or they didn't have proper training, or their equipment wasn't properly maintained, whatever the case is. And I could go on and on about that, but I don't want, not here, not now. So let's talk real quick about positive pressure versus demand. All full face masks when you're in the water are positive pressure masks. Now, why is that? Well, what creates positive pressure in the water is the position of the regulator, which I don't have the regulator in the mask here, is the regulator in relationship to the airspace of the mask. All air wants to do one thing underwater, and that's go to the surface, right? Does that make sense? And you can think of that of a couple of different ways, but think of buoyancy as weight of water. So what the water's doing is the water's weighing down and it's squeezing that air to the surface. Well, it does that with a full face mask, but you've got a semi-rigid vessel of air in that it's encapsulated with the airspace of the mask. So what happens here is that when you burp the side, if you slide your finger in, open it up, and I'll do another video on this eventually, where you slide your finger in, open this up, air's going to come out. Little, if any, water's going to come in. What happens is, as that air rushes out, the reason why it's rushing out is because the water's pushing in on the diaphragm. When the water's pushing in on the diaphragm, pushing in on the lever's lifting up the seat off the orifice, injecting air into your mask, and that blows the air out. Notice when you're in the water and you're doing this training thing that if you slide your finger into the side of the mask and open it up, it's going to blow out. If you're this far above the mask, it's going to blow out with a certain amount of pressure. Not a whole lot. The pressure is going to be equivalent to where the median is of the diaphragm to wherever it is you open up in the mask. Now, if you go up to the very top of the mask and you slide your finger in and you open the mask up, you're going to know it blows out with, you're going to notice it blows out with significant more force. Does that make sense? So it'll blow out with more force. And again, it's going to be the equivalent amount of pressure as the amount of water, the inches of water column between your diaphragm and wherever you open up your mask. So if it's 6 inches, it's going to blow out with 6 inches of water column of force. So, or pressure. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, the Interspiro full face mask with the positive pressure feature in it is an SCBA function. It's designed for SCBAs, self-contained breathing apparatus. This is a self-contained breathing apparatus with a U in there, scuba. As we all know, we learned that from our basic open water, and when you first picked up a magazine, you were interested in scuba diving. So when you're in water, the dynamics of water are completely different than the dynamics of air. Water is 784 times denser than air, right? So we swim through water, we walk through air. And to apply the performance of an SCBA that's designed for an airspace or toxic gas environment to how it works in the hydrostatic environment of water, two totally different environments, the dynamics are totally different. So in effect, when you have 6 inches of water pressure blowing out of this, when you pull this mask open here, with a positive pressure Interspiro mask, you've got 7 to 7.5 inches, all rough figures there. So what you have now is a mask that's going to be a little more prone to burping, and burping is not your friend when you're diving, especially in contaminated water. If this makes sense. So with burping, if your mask is burping, think of the edge of this mask, the surface of the feather of this mask is going like this when that mask is burping air out. So as it's going like this and the air is going out, there's potential for water to back in. And if that's the case, then you're doing yourself you got yourself an issue there, in that you're exposing yourself now to the water that you're trying to protect yourself from. So I'm not a big fan for positive pressure in water. Now, I don't want to dog positive pressure. Positive pressure is an absolute must if you're in a gaseous environment. But for in water, and this is something I say in every lecture that I do, is that there's not a body of water that I would go into with a positive pressure mask that I would go into with a demand regulator. It's if I'm someplace where it's like, hey, we need you to dive and you got a positive pressure mask over there, fine. I'll use it. I would. People don't call on me to do that stuff, anymore. But it's still the point being is that positive pressure, and when you think about the lever assembly of positive pressure, especially the Interspiro mask, that's not. I mean, it's a decent design, but it's not the same level of design as, say, the valve stem of the Interspiro. The valve stem of the Interspiro is a genius, if you ask me, but the lever assembly is not. And what you have with the positive pressure lever is you got one that pops in, it pops open on you inadvertently, and you're losing air, and it's a maintenance issue. It's going to be problematic. We'll put it that way. Whereas a demand regulator. My first positive pressure mask, or first full face mask I got, traded from my brother. It was 1989, and it was a gray rubber positive pressure full face mask, Interspiro. When I came to work at OTS, I used the demand regulator silicone mask for the first time. I immediately put my gray rubber mask on eBay, sold it, and I haven't dived positive pressure. Maybe I have, but as a matter of routine, I haven't dived positive pressure since. The positive pressure is just not necessary for diving, and I would argue that point with anybody. And it's amazing how many people will tell me, "Oh, but we have to have it because of the fire side." You're talking two different environments. The dynamics don't apply. They're two totally different things. So it's just not necessary for diving. But if you're using your mask in an environment where, confined space, you may be going into a confined space and the air is not breathable around you, then absolutely. You need positive pressure for that application. Oceaneering, I taught a class for them many years ago. I don't want to get sidetracked here, but I taught a class for them many years ago. They go into what they call the habitat that they weld onto the side of oil rigs, and they're clamped down on the oil rigs. They go in, they flush that out with displace the water with air or an inert gas, I believe. From what I was told, usually they just use air, but they go in, they do welding and cutting on the legs in this environment, in this habitat. Well, they're wearing their diving masks because they're diving down to get into this habitat, and they're wearing their diving masks for that. Interspiro is what they were using and still are, if I remember right. And when I found out, I had previously talked them into demand regulators. When I found out what they were doing, it's like, oh, no. Absolutely, you need positive pressure in that application. So if that makes sense. Hopefully that goes a little ways. At some point, I don't know, talk about the rubber versus silicone. Okay, that was your question there. Man, squirrels, no squirrels. Um, two dive teams work together. One has wireless, and the other one hardwires. They're away from them to kind of connect. Yes, through their tender. That's the only way they can talk. And in reality, dive teams should be working independent through their tenders anyway. I don't know that I want my dive team talking to another dive team. You got your task at hand. Your tenders are responsible for you as a diver. You're going to have another dive team come in and working hand in hand. Probably not necessary. I understand the desire for that, but as far as cross communications or communications compatibility between hardwire and wireless, there's no real compatibility. You can't take and run a speaker wire. I mean, there are ways you can do it, and we've done it for special applications, but as a matter of routine, it's not going to be. It's a special purpose application. Whenever we do cross configuration between wireless and hardwire communications, it just doesn't work that way. So let's see. Any other questions that we have here? We're narrowing down there. I'm going to go back. I'm going to review the video that I did earlier. Hopefully it recorded locally here and that I don't have any glitches on it. If I do, I can try to go in and do another, kind of duplicate this lecture, or I might call it a scratch. We'll just have to wait and see. I'll check it out. So I want to thank everybody for attending. Again, if anybody has their dive teams that they're working with, we can, you want to if you want me to do a lecture or a discussion with you, troubleshooting your comms, specific education questions and answer session, just shoot me a note and we can schedule a meeting on Zoom and get that going. I'm more than happy to do that. Things are starting to lift down here in the Florida Panhandle. We're getting back into business. Helicopter business is opening up this weekend. Restaurants are starting to open up and other things at a limited basis. And thank goodness it's 8 weeks of this. If we haven't, resolved some of this, I don't think it's going to be resolved anymore through quarantine. Everybody be safe out there. So anybody have any questions, feel free to shoot me a note. Again, thanks. I'm being repetitious here, but thanks for attending. Sorry for the technical problems. I'll look into it. The next one, I hope, if I have to change computers, I will. I'll have this problem solved. Thanks again for attending, and I really appreciate you guys. We thank everybody for being customers and being our users. Take care.